Welcome everybody to this digital panel discussion that we're hosting. We're delighted to see so many of you here today. I'm Brian Baxter, the Executive Director with the Quad City Symphony Orchestra. And at the QCSO, we're seeking to be where access meets inspiration. And this is with all of our educational, all of our performance programs, and this panel tonight, which is something new for us, is certainly a big part of that. I want to introduce our partner this evening, the United Way's African American Leadership Society. The AALS is committed to fighting for racial equity now and into the future. The organization focuses on fostering the next generation of African American leaders, giving every African American child in every neighborhood an equal opportunity to succeed, and uplifting the voices of Black Quad citizens. And obviously we're so pleased to be partnering with this wonderful group, and this digital panel is going to delve into the experience of students of color in public K-12 music education and talk about the importance of equitable public music education access for all students and why this equitable access supports really broad community outcomes. So we're hoping this is the first of many, the first of kind of an ongoing conversation about equity in music education right here in the Quad Cities. Now, Kayla Babbers, who is the manager of AALS, is not able to join us tonight. So I wanted to read a quote from her about this project. Growing up, music was an integral part of my education. I participated in school-based music programs from elementary until I graduated high school. I am excited that AALS was asked to be part of this collaboration. The panel discussion is a great way to spotlight the Black experience within music education and bring new perspectives to how these experiences impact students of color. So like I said, the QCSO is honored to partner with the AALS, and advancing racial equity as an institution, as a symphony, and in our Quad Cities community is essential to securing a brighter future with equal opportunity for everyone. So we want to highlight this essential role that K-12 music ed plays in advancing literacy, individual and collective student achievement, and just those broad community outcomes that it provides. So we've got this event today, and our partnership extends even beyond today. So we have a concert coming up April 10th. It's our final Masterworks of the year. It's celebrating the diversity of American music, actually a partnership as well with the Figge Art Museum. And we're we're donating $1 for every ticket sold right back to the African American Leadership Society to that concert. So hope you can check that concert out later on next month. But before we get going, just a couple quick housekeeping items. We just ask everyone mute yourselves during the panel. We will have a Q&A session at the end, at which point we'll invite any participants to ask any questions. Unmute yourselves, any questions or comments you have at the end of the session. And also feel free, I'll be watching the chat function. So feel free to chime in the chat with comments or questions. And for those that are kind of relevant to what's being talked about by the panel, we'll do our best to pull those up into the conversation. And like I said, this is being recorded. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my friend and colleague, our assistant conductor and youth ensembles music director, Ernesto Estigarribia, who's serving as our host tonight, and he's going to introduce our wonderful panel to you all. So thank you again for being here.
Thank you, Brian. Welcome, everyone. I am delighted to be here to discuss these issues that are extremely important as a society, but more specifically in our field. Today, we have a distinguished panel that will certainly spark an interesting conversation about the experience of students of ethnic minorities in music education. Our panelists are not only accomplished musicians, but they're also leading educators in the Quad Cities area. Today, we have with us Kimberly Gardner, who's a music teacher at Francis Willard Elementary, and prior to that, she was a band director in the Davenport School District. We also have Calesia House, who is the band and orchestra director at Wilson Middle School in Moline, Illinois. And joining us today, we also have Wesley Julien, who's a songwriter, drummer, and producer from Rock Island, and regularly works and performs with an ample roster of artists who are too many to name. Welcome to all our guests today. And the format for this conversation will be, there will be a prompt, there will be a question that each of our panelists will take their time to answer. And as a reminder, if you have a comment or a question during their responses, please submit it via the chat box. Otherwise, hold it until the end when we're gonna take questions from the audience. So welcome everybody. I wanted to start by talking about your personal journey through music and what was your upbringing like and what role did music education have in your formative years? And let's go in this order. Kimberly first, and then Calesia, and then Wesley.
Well, to begin, hi everybody, I'm Kimberly Gardner. My upbringing is a little bit different than most because I was an Army brat. So both of my parents are Army veterans, and we moved around my entire childhood. So I've lived in different parts of the country, I've lived overseas, and I've lived around people from all kinds of different backgrounds, socioeconomic, multicultural groups of people, that the one thing we had in common was being military, and that was our culture. So I have a different outlook on some of the things that some people that haven't moved a lot have. And when it comes to music, one of the first things I always remembered whenever we'd move to a new duty station is the first thing that my dad would unpack and set up would be our sound system. So the first thing he would do is he would get out the receiver, because, you know, at the time it wasn't an all-in-one situation. He'd get out the receiver, he'd get out the cassette deck, the CD deck, the turntable, put it all together, have the speakers set up, and we would have that going, and music would be the first thing that we had going in the house. So everything else got unpacked to music, chores got done to music, and we had a lot of different sessions in our house where we just sat and listened to things. And the listening turned into conversations about heritage and being introduced to all types of music throughout my childhood, I think has shaped who I am and the things that I listen to now. All the way, even up, I still got introduced to new music even as I got into high school and then into college. As a student in music, I honestly don't remember many of my general music teachers, which always makes me really sad as a general music teacher. Like, I hope my students will remember me someday. But the one that I did remember, I remember her name is Miss Summers. She was an African-American music teacher, the only one I had in my K-12 music education. And she taught me my first saxophone lesson. And I will never forget that woman to this day. Because of her, I was able to get started on saxophone. And then of course, because of my mother, because she bought me the saxophone from a pawn shop for my birthday when I was in the 4th grade. So it was the coolest situation. I will never forget those experiences and be appreciative of the chance to be able to be a part of music in that way. Moving around a lot meant that I didn't have roots in any particular place. So it was hard to get into the crowd and be able to do the things that the other kids were doing. And music was that thing that's weaved throughout my life from beginning to now. And I've become a music teacher, which is really funny because I wanted to be a doctor until my senior year of high school. I was taking the extra biology, the extra math. I'd taken up through calculus in my senior year. I was ready to go be a doctor. And we had a student come into Fountain Fort Carson High School who was a fantastic drummer, like amazing, but couldn't read music. So we could play something for him and he would play it back to you and would have it. And at the time I was the drum major of a marching band. Yay, go Trojans. And my band director told me, well, now it's time for you to do your job as drum major. And I thought to myself, that's your job. You're the music teacher. But he had me teach this freshman his drum part, and I loved it. And from that moment on, I wanted to be a music teacher, which meant during my senior year, I had to flip everything around and get auditions and do all the things. And I think it shocked my parents. And no, it shocked my parents. I don't think it shocked them. It shocked them. But they are some of the most supportive parents I have when it comes to being a music educator. They are some of my biggest cheerleaders. So that's kind of how I've come to music education and how it's been a part of my life.
Kimberly, when you say you wanted to become a doctor, just to clarify, that's not doctor in music.
No, I want to be a pediatrician, still with kids.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for sharing your story, Kimberly. Calesia, let's hear your upbringing.
Hi, everybody. I'm Calesia House. So I was born and raised up toward Chicago in Joliet, Illinois, about 30 minutes south of Chicago, in a very, very rough part of the town or side of town, whatever you want to call it. I was born, I guess you can call them the projects. I don't know if they still call them housing projects now. That's what they were called when I was growing up. So very low income, single mom. There was 3 of us. And my music experience started in the church, like most African Americans in those situations. I was brought up as a Pentecostal Christian, and so music was everything that, or gospel music, I should say, was everything that I knew about music before I started band. My grandmother funnily always used to say that I was singing before I could talk. I don't know if that's true, but I mean, it probably was. So singing was actually my first instrument. I sang from, there was videos of me 2 years old standing up in front of the church singing. So that was my first music experience that I actually remember. And being in that type of situation, a low income situation, there was, especially with the schools that I went to in the housing projects, because we had one school that served the housing projects, the housing authority area. And so I never had a general music class. I didn't even know that was a thing. So until I got to college and I had my first general music class. So that was an experience in itself. So I guess I don't even know how to describe my first general music class in college. I was like, what, I'm supposed to do what with kids? Teach them what? Doesn't even know that's a thing. But anywho, so I started band in 4th grade, and my band teacher, Mr. Johnson, and I will never forget him. He was my first Black male teacher that I had. And he started me on trombone. And that is how I got my love for band. And funny story, I actually wanted to be an orchestra, but my mom said no. She didn't think orchestra was the way for me, as she said, to get out. And that meant to get out of our low income situation, to get me out and into more experiences. Little did she know that I would grow up to be an orchestra director and love orchestra. But that was my ticket out, or at least band was the way my mom saw us, or saw me getting out of and not repeating the cycle, I guess. And anywho, I joined band, loved band, absolutely loved band, but I didn't want to be a band teacher or a band director. That was not my goal. And as I continued on, I never took a private lesson, but I made the top band in high school my freshman year. That was, I didn't even know what an accomplishment that was until I got to college. And then I had my first private lesson in college. So those are my music experiences, and then becoming a teacher, I guess. So those are my childhood music experiences. Hopefully I answered all your questions.
That's wonderful. No, absolutely. Yeah. I would love to hear Wesley's perspective on this. Like, how did you come up and how did you become a musician? Wesley, I believe you're still muted.
All right, can you hear me now? Okay. Yes. Like it was said earlier, like a lot of young Black kids, I started off in the church. My parents, they grew up Baptist, and my godparents were Kojic, Church of God in Christ. So I would go back and forth between those churches. So I started off with those dynamics. And then I got piano lessons by this woman by the name of Mrs. Eloise Clavon. She also taught my mother organ as well. So just getting that start. And then I had private lessons with a man named Mr. Williams. He used to teach in the East Moline district, I believe. And I had lessons from him. And then again, I just continued to grow in the church. Then I got into other school bands. I never had a Black formal music education teacher in schools. So it was always private whenever I had that. And that was in my younger years. When it came to my older years, I didn't get private instruction. So I started venturing off into just other bands. And then I went to college at Western Illinois University. Prior to that, I went to the Conservatory of Recording Arts and Sciences, where I learned audio engineering. That's when I really started tapping a lot more into the production side. I dabbled with it in high school with songwriting and production. But like I said, just at Crafts, I really dug into it. And that's kind of what influenced a lot of me being a musician today.
Wonderful, wonderful. These are all great stories. And what I'm kind of like seeing here is the common thread that you all remember this one teacher from your formative years that really inspired, not only because of their musicianship, but because you could identify with their persona. And I think that ties into the next question I have for you, which is, how can we have bigger aspirational goals to achieve greater or more equitable access to music education? I mean, the advantages of children practicing music in their formative years are endless. I mean, we can talk about the proven impact that it has on test scores and literacy levels, and music is one of the very few activities that we know that stimulates both sides of the brain at the same time. I mean, the benefits of music education are just so vast, yet access to music education remains inequitable. What are some big goals that we can have to bridge that gap? And let's go in the same order, if you guys don't mind. Kimberly, Calesia, and Wesley.
Well, I'm going to come from the general music perspective. So when I first think of an aspirational goal for general music or music in general in the state of Illinois, is making sure that it's required as a state standard everywhere, and that students are getting a certain amount of music education time, just as they're required to get a certain amount of physical education time. So having that same kind of standard across the board for the arts in general is going to make sure that students have access, or at least start to take a step towards that. As a general music teacher in the elementary school, I think about the fact that I have a lot of different languages even in my classroom. And so music is the one thing that allows us to communicate, to create community, to do, like you said, add to language, because it helps when we're singing songs and we're pointing and we're doing different things, that people start to take up language, no matter what language they're learning to sing in. And something that I always thought was interesting is a lot of different types of classes you could take kindergarten through 12th grade. So you could take music, general music. Every student in my elementary school takes music from kindergarten through 6th grade. Once they get to junior high, to 7th grade, if they haven't decided to take band or orchestra by then, they're a year behind. And then not only are they a year behind, but outside of choir, there's no other elective that is music based for them. From 7th grade all the way up through 12th grade, there is no opportunity to take music outside of a performing ensemble. Typically, you have outliers here and there that'll have a theory class or a music appreciation class, but in general, music making for most students stops at 5th grade or 6th grade, depending on what you have in your elementary school. And to me, that's a really big issue. I feel like music should be offered for everyone. It's a whosoever will situation. If you want to be in music in some way, then we should provide a way for you to do that. And I think that general music is one of those things that should be offered all the way up through high school, because you have students that are, maybe they don't want to be in a typical, Western performing ensemble, but maybe they just want to be a part of a community where they can perform and they can continue to build relationships. And I think music does that. And it allows people to build community in a way that you can't do in a science class. I love science to a degree, but you can't do it in a math class. And that's my favorite non-music subject. And we are stunting musical growth just in that one thing, in keeping kids from being able to take any kind of general music after 5th or 6th grade. And to me, changing that would change the game for a lot of things, because if students are continuing to make music in a general music setting, how much easier would it be for them to go, I'm in 8th grade, I had a chance to play the tuba in 6th grade, but now I feel like I really can, and I've had more experience and I can do these other things in music, and they feel like they can actually take those steps towards things. To me, coming from my perspective, that is a huge aspirational goal.
Kimberly, as a follow-up for that, do you think that has to do with this concentration that in education we have moved more towards like STEM classes and technology and math and all sorts of subjects?
It's funny because you see people talking about STEAM. They're trying to add the arts in there. They went from STEAM and they called it, or from STEM and called it STEAM. But you really don't see much changing, even though they're acknowledging that arts are important. That's what I think is very interesting. They're saying it's important, but they're not, putting their money where their mouth is, so to speak. And I don't think that has changed. That's been the experience with general music for a long time, with the exception of the original teaching practices for music, because music education started because they would bring the communities together to teach everybody how to read music so they could sing in the church. So I don't necessarily know exactly when that dropped off, when we stopped wanting people to be able to read and participate in music on a community level. But wherever that happened, it just started creating such a disservice to the people in our community.
Thank you so much for that perspective. Calesia, what is your take on this?
I do want to piggyback off of Kimberly there about general music from K through 12. I think that is, or would be, a great opportunity for many students, like she said, who does not want to be in a performance ensemble. And as a performance ensemble director, that's like mainly what I do. I have a lot of kids who don't like to perform, believe it or not. I actually have kids who tell me they stay in my class, they stay in my band, or they stay in my orchestra because of me, but they don't like to perform. Like, they tell me this as they're graduating. I mean, yay for me, but I want you to continue on. And so when I hear that they're going to drop off at 8th grade, when I'm like, you're not even at the top of the mountain yet, kid. Like, you're just now getting through the snow. So when I hear that, I'm like, oh, I got them, but now I lost them. And not just now that I lost them, now 9 through 12 lost them. Now college lost them. Now community lost them, because now they don't want to do it anymore. So I completely agree with you on that, Kimberly. That was fantastic. And I taught general music for 6 years, and I never wanted to teach general music because, as I said before, I didn't know what general music was. I had no idea because I didn't have one. So I taught it for 6 years. I loved it my first 2 years. And then I realized I wasn't as good as I wanted to be, because I knew that there needed to be someone in that position who absolutely loved starting kids with music and growing that passion in them. And I'm more of a performer. Like, I love the performance side. So there's no right or wrong. I just knew that there could have been someone else there to keep that love of music for the kids. So that's why I went toward performance, because I knew that was where I needed to be. But the general music teacher always, always, always gets looked over. They are the most important person in a child's education, outside of their core teacher, obviously. But in their music education, the general music teacher is the person who introduces music from our standpoint, from reading and writing and clapping and tapping and singing and dancing. And if you don't have that love for that job, or for that that grit to get in there and be the patient person that you need to be, it just dies. And I feel that happens a lot in smaller schools, in smaller towns, towns and districts and schools that don't have enough money in the first place to hire a general music teacher, or to hire someone from the arts to do this. And I feel that's where we suffer the most, getting into those buildings. And when we get into those buildings, staying into those buildings, that is honestly one of the keys. I'm in a bigger district now, but that wasn't always the case. One of my very first job, as soon as I was student teaching, I was at Eagle Ridge. My band was 9 kids, and 6 of them were clarinet players. And my general music classes were about 12 or 13 kids every 30 minutes. So that was an eye-opening experience, because I always assumed that it would be more kids and more instruments and all of these things, but I didn't realize how small my school was, how small the community was, and how much a person needed to stay in that position for consistency, for the program to thrive, for the community to latch a hold to it and actually support this thing. So that was one of my first gigs. And as I continued on through my schools, I realized that the general music teacher, whoever gets that position, is solely responsible for tying the community in and buying the community support into keeping an arts program, no matter what it might be, no matter if it's general music, band, orchestra, choir. That's a huge toll in itself. Sorry, I just went on a general music tangent. I should be talking about
General music.
I should be talking about ensemble and keeping them, but honestly, if they don't get past the general music teacher, let's be honest, they're not coming to me. I won't get them. So so I really agree with Kimberly that there needs to be general music all the way through. At Moline, we do offer general music to 6th and 7th graders, along with ensembles, along with band, orchestra, choir. But general music is not offered in 8th grade. So the only musical outlet that they will get at that point in time will either be band, orchestra, or choir, or if they choose to join in the musical, which is in the spring. So that is a huge sad downfall for a lot of programs, not just ours, but it's something that really should be looked at and what we can do to change it. And it does a huge disservice to a lot of students of color, because if it wasn't for my band teacher giving me my instrument, I would not be here today. I did not pay for my instrument. I knew my mom could not afford an instrument, so I had no idea why she was telling me to join band. So it's like, we can't even afford food for the next week. Like, how are you going to buy this instrument? But my band teacher gave my family, actually gave all three of us, my brother, my sister, and me, our instruments. And that's how we were in band. And that's how we got through music and had music in our home. A lot of kids don't have that. I'm willing to do such things like that because I know that it was done for me, and look at where I am. I got out of that situation because of my instrument. And my goal is to do that for any student, no matter their race, religion, creed. I don't really care. I don't care what your social status is, your economic status is. I just want to give you something that to show you that you can be better than wherever you are right now. So Anyway, I'm done.
No, that is very touching, that connection that you make, because it brings people in and it brings people together. And as you guys were talking about, like, it builds that community, and we need to continue building that. Wesley, tell us what you think about this particular topic. Like, how can we make it more bigger access for all to come into music education?
For me, I think one of the things that we can assure that we are doing, like it's been said, as far as keeping our youth engaged, is assuring that there is a cultural connection. I know for me growing up, excuse me, Rock Island is 18% Black. So there's not a lot of us, at least in the academic setting. So I didn't have a lot of my Black friends playing in bands after 8th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade. I didn't have any Black teachers. Not to say that my teachers weren't bad. They were amazing teachers, and they encouraged me to continue to go on and pursue and really, and I'm thankful that they did. I'm really curious what would have happened if I would have seen someone who looked like me, who looked like they came from my situation, who looked like they could have been my cousin or my auntie or my uncle. You know what I mean? If I know it, we just have that way of connecting with each other and being able to understand each other. There are certain things that, especially when there's that connection with that teacher and that student, there's certain things I couldn't necessarily talk about with my band director, not to say that, but I knew to a certain extent. So those are the things that are just interesting, and I can just say that we need to keep into thought to assure that we get, we find ways to keep our kids interested and keep them engaged. That's that again, that really talks to their culture and that they're able to relate to. And you guys had also mentioned ways that are things that are outside of performance. So maybe finding people who want to get into the production side. So teaching youth how to make instrumentals, or teaching youth how to engineer, as far as learning about audio engineering. Other students who are more business savvy, teach them about music business, because we need music business lawyers. Or those who are good with math, we're going to need music accountants. So finding ways, like, you can be involved in music however you want to. It's just about finding your way in and getting in where you best fit in, and letting our youth know about these options.
That is absolutely true. And it's very interesting that you mentioned the producing side, because I believe every musician I know became a producer this year, recording themselves, like experimenting with different gear and yeah. So I mean, I think you touched on something incredibly relevant to our times. But I have a follow-up on this category on access to equitable music education. What can we do to be more inclusive in an ensemble-based music education? So bands, orchestras, and choirs. What can we do to improve the culture of those educational settings to be more inclusive, to attract students of all backgrounds?
I honestly, going off of what Wes said, you have to have more people of color in the positions leading those ensembles. And not to say that students don't want to learn from someone who isn't Black or who isn't Hispanic or who isn't Asian. It's not to say that, but if I can see myself, like I emailed Calesia because I was like, there is another Black female music educator in the Quad Cities. Like, I got all excited because in my last school district, I was the only Black arts teacher. In this school district, I'm the only Black music teacher. So when I was like, not only that, but she teaches band and is killing it in band, like, it's such a shock. And it shouldn't be a shock that we see people of color leading strong ensembles, that we see people of color getting superior ratings, that we see people of color growing band and orchestra programs, but it's a shock. And it's because we have this system that is set up to only allow certain groups access. And to speak to what you're talking about being able to provide access into those groups, one, we have to have counter stereotypes so that people can get outside of their mind that Old Dead White Men is the music we always have to play, and that only white males are band directors because they dominate the field, or get out of people's minds that what an orchestra rehearsal is like. Sometimes you don't pull out an instrument. Sometimes something else is happening within that rehearsal to get kids ready to perform the music. And a big thing that I like to, I think more ensemble directors need to spend time with students outside of the ensemble space. They need to build that relationship with them, because honestly, if I don't know you, I'm not going to trust the things you're telling me. You're telling me I can play in band. You're telling me you're going to give me an instrument. You're telling my mom it's not going to cost her anything. Is it not, though? Is there something there that you're not telling me? What's the catch? And it's because it's been this systematic issue in our nation, in our society. And so there's distrust. And so that relationship has to be built with ensemble leaders. We need to see more ensemble leaders of color excelling. And I've seen people trying to do things to provide access. Like, there are people that have instruments that they're looking to put in kids' hands. And there are people that have lesson programs where they're trying to get lessons to kids that they don't have to pay for. But how do they get there? And what if it doesn't work with my mom's work schedule because she's working 2 jobs? And I have siblings that are younger than me that I have to watch. Like, there's all these other barriers that we have to make sure we work around. And while I think a lot of teachers are willing to, there are definitely some that are not. And I've come across some teachers in my decade plus of teaching that have said that that's not part of my job to do that. And we have to change the mindset, and we have to provide people a chance to do that. And that means we have to put more people of color in these positions. But it's like the chicken and the egg. You don't know which one to do first or how to accomplish it. It's just grinding and figuring it out little by little.
Yes. So first of all, yeah, I had no idea there was another one of me out there. So kudos to you, Kimberly. Like, this should not be a shock. I've been living in the Quad Cities going on 11 years now this May, and had no idea that there was another Black female music teacher, band director, whatever you did. I had no idea. And it's not because I don't know the Rock Island staff. I'm pretty cozy with the Rock Island staff. So that was like a huge shock to me. And like she said, it shouldn't be a shock. It really shouldn't be a shock. I mean, I'm shocked when I see other women band or orchestra directors. I'm very shocked because I'm like, yes. But then to see another woman of color, no matter what race she may be, I even go, yes. Oh my gosh. And I really shouldn't have to do that. You don't see the males doing that, like, oh, hey. So it's one of those things where I think our students need to see themselves in us. And band was an easy choice for me, besides my mom telling me I was going to do it. But my band director was Black. Like, I saw myself in him. He serviced our school, our project school only. So I knew what he was about, and my mom knew of him as well. So it was like, well, yeah, this is our ticket out. And when I got to the middle school, he was also my band director. So I knew that I was good for another 3 years. I knew I was good till 8th grade to continue on. And after 8th grade, I made that choice to continue on because I loved it. I loved it. And I only loved it because he instilled that love in me, and my family trusted him. Like, it was just a trust there with that teacher. And I'm not saying that, if you're not the same race, you can't have that trust, because that's not true. Because my high school band director was not my same race, and I trust him still to this day. He's honestly one of the biggest father figures in my life. So it's honestly just having that relationship and that love, and how to get more kids who are poor or different races into our programs is just getting out there, being out there. You honestly don't have to jump through a lot of hoops and do a big old show and circus and pony show. We just want to feel, and I say we because I'm thinking of myself as that little girl, but we just want to feel a connection to what you feel a connection to. Make us love what you love. And I tell my kids, I only have one son, but my students, I tell my kids that I love band and orchestra, and my job is really not to teach you these notes or this instrument. My job is to make you love band and orchestra as much as I love band and orchestra, so that you can go out into the world and be cultured and have different experiences, not for you to become a musician, a paid musician. Like, I would love that, but that's not my ultimate goal. So my goal is to get the kids, no matter what race or socioeconomic class they are, to understand that you can do this. A lot of kids feel they can't, especially a lot of kids who are low income, because we've been told we can't. It's shown that we can't. You may not have said it, but we feel it. So it's a lot of little things that are there that we want to feel a connection to something. And I don't know how you can think outside of the box, especially with these lovely generation of kids today. I don't know, TikTok maybe. Play music that relates to them. I don't do TikTok. I'm too old for that. I told my students that's too old for that one. But music that relates to them. I'm not saying play explicit music, but I'm saying get something that the kids know that would hype up your program, that would hype up your general music class, that would hype up music production, whatever it may be. You have to tap into them and get outside of yourself. That's the only way you can grab kids. That's it.
Wes, it's your turn.
All right. Yeah, I think you guys both have said it again, just figuring out the best way to connect to your students and connecting to the youth, finding composers that look like them, studying composers. There was more than just composers that wore pale makeup and had powdered wigs. So it's like, let's explore more than that. Let's explore newer music that's happening today, the history of today, what's being created today. There's a lot of cool things that is happening out there. There's like hip hop strings and things of that nature. They're figuring out how to mix orchestra and trap music. Like the Migos just did a concert, with the symphonic strings. So figuring out, how do you partner up with your local hip hop community and put on a hip hop show with strings, or, things like that to make it really interesting. Nas just recently did something as well, collaborating Illmatic. So how do we make it relate to them? How do we get to invite more people who look like them to come in and say, yes, I made it out of the situation that you're in too. So you can do it. If I can do it, you can do it as well. So representation truly does make the situation. So as long as we're able to do that, spaces that aren't as traditional. So instead of, go to them. Go to the basketball court that's in the hood somewhere and host a concert there. Go to their churches, go to them. So I think we do those things again. I think we will really continue, and they'll be able to stay. And as I was told, give the gift that continuously gives.
That is beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that, Wesley. And I think you just touched upon our next subject, which is a big can of worms, repertoire. And let's talk about programming and our thoughts about programming. Of course, this will take just another 3 hours to talk, but we're not gonna take that long. But I just wanna highlight something that happened here in our community, and it happened in East Moline in the Glenview Middle School, and I visited their mariachi program, and I talked to the teacher, Rich Clark, and I said, like, why are you doing mariachi? And he said, look, if my school was 75% Russian, I will be doing a balalaika orchestra here, but it happens to be, I forget the exact number, but a large portion, it happens to be Hispanic of Mexican descent. So I didn't know much about mariachi, so I went out there and learned them myself so I can teach something that is culturally relevant to my students. And the way he said it was like, this is a no-brainer. Like that's the end of the conversation. Nothing else to say. But that's not how things are in outside of East Moline, right? So in terms of programming, what are the considerations that we should be thinking about to achieve more inclusion and more equity in music education? And most importantly, how are the historical practices that have been in place inform your own programming with youth in your own contexts?
So when I was a band director, I picked my programming based off of the repertoire that was not required because there was a certain type of repertoire that you needed to have. But I'm going to let Calesia talk more on that when she talks, because I'm sure she's dealing with that to this day. As far as general music, it's such a blessing to be in general music because I do what I want with my kids. And I'm blessed with my administrator. He's basically like, sure, let's do it. But recently with my students, what I like to do is ask them what they're interested in. The population of my school is extremely diverse. I have a large immigrant population, Karen, a lot of groups from West Africa. We had students from Iraq. I mean, just all over. And Caucasian, white, whatever you would like to call that, is the minority in our building. And for me, I don't just go based off of race or language. I ask the kids what they're interested in because they're their own cultural group on their own. Just having the age difference between me and them, they're like, oh, this is hot, Mrs. Gardner. I'm like, okay, what is it? Tell me about it. So I try to do things geared towards them. And so for me, I pick programming that is gonna teach them what they need to learn. It's still gonna hit the standards, but it's gonna connect to them. So when I do stick passing activities, I'm not playing Irish jigs. These kids don't care about an Irish jig. I find a song that has about the same tempo and they're singing along to it. And the next thing I know, I see this really cool stick passing situation happening and they don't even realize they're doing it because they're just jamming to whatever the piece is. And recently, before we had to shut down the schools, we had a hip hop fair. And normally I try to do a program, but the kids I let them choose. I said, do you guys want to do a program and perform, or do you want to do a fair? And they said, we want to do a fair. And they set up in our gym all these trifold posters like you would at a science fair. And they either researched an element of hip hop or they researched an MC, a rapper. And we had some teachers that were like, I'm doing this too, because it was fun. And the kids wrote their own lyrics to a song. We started with You Can't Stop Me by Andy Mineo. We analyzed the song. I said, what do you guys think he's saying? They told me about it. These are my 5th and 6th graders. I kind of let them do a little bit more autonomous. And then they said, well, they're really saying no one can hold them back. So then I said, okay, well, now you write them from your perspective. And when I tell you guys, I learned so much about my students. Not only can they can write poetry, but they can get their feelings across and they're strong. They have strong voices. So I was able to put those and have those flashing in the background. And Brooke Greenwood, who's one of our 6th grade teachers, is amazing. She took a group of students that decided, hey, we want to be a part of a little bit of a performance. And she helped them do like the evolution of hip hop dance. And so every 15 minutes, we paused the fair and we made everybody get off the floor, and a group of students of all different backgrounds came out and they did about 2 minutes of dancing, and every 15 minutes it evolved into a new level of dancing and hip hop. And it was amazing because kids that you would normally not consider to be dancers or think would be dancers were out there just doing all the things, stanky leg and everything. And I was just looking at this in amazement. But I think the one thing that I get from this is seeing into the lives of my students in a way that I didn't know that I would. I had one group that chose Tupac. You know, you have people fighting over Tupac and Biggie. And I said, nope, only one group can have them. And each group was able to put a Chromebook with headphones to play one appropriate song from their artist. And they had to get it approved from me, and I had to be able to see the video. So this was a lot of extra work on my part, but it was worth it because I learned about some new songs myself. But then I had this group ask me, they said, Mrs. Gardner, we really want to play Brenda Had a Baby. Yes, that's what I said. I said, excuse me, you want to do what? And I said, well, why? And they told me, they said, Mrs. Gardner, this is something that people in our neighborhood are going through. Like this is what people are dealing with. And for anybody who doesn't know, it talks about a teenage mother and the things that she's going through. And I said, well, guys, that's a little heavy for the elementary crowd. And they said, but that's the song we really want to do. And they stated their case and wrote a statement, and we made a deal. I talked to my administrator, and what I love about him, he's like, I trust you to make this decision. I'm not gonna lie, in the back of my mind, I was like, no, you decide. But they ended up using that song, and the only rule, I said, adults only are allowed to listen to it, and you have to explain to them why you chose it. And so many adults enjoyed going to this group and being able to listen to them, and they had cards and they were ready to explain. And they had so much passion around choosing this song. And I learned a little bit more about them. I get to see them from kindergarten through 6th grade. So 7 years, I get to be their music teacher. That's another cool thing about being a general music teacher. I get them like half their music career. But I also got to see more into their life outside of music and outside of school and see what they're feeling. And that wouldn't have happened if I would have just been like, all right, guys, we're going to do something out of the Music Connection book. Pull them out. Let's read, let's do a round of Frere Jacques, and we'll do this canon, and then we'll perform that. Like, don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with Frere Jacques, but they're not connected to that in the same way that they were connected to these pieces that they chose. And they still learned everything I wanted them to learn and did more. So it's super important for me as a teacher personally to choose music that is specifically connected to my students in front of me. Not every kid's going to connect to Tupac the way this group did. So I'm not going to try to recreate that exact same experience, because each new group that comes through is going to have something different they're connected to. Right now, I'm learning a lot about K-pop, y'all. I'm just saying. So it just depends. I know I'm learning. It just depends on the students that are in front of me. I get to know them and I teach them, and not, what somebody thinks I should teach them.
That's one thing I do miss about general music is getting to do my own repertoire. As an ensemble director, yes, we can, and then no, we cannot. And those of you who are ensemble directors, you know that springtime, no, you cannot do your own repertoire if you are going to contest or if you are going to a festival, unless your festival has like open rules. Like we do 2 festivals, so I have one where it has open rules. IGSMA, you can play what you want. There's no list that you have to pick from. And then there's another festival where you pick only from this list. Like your ensemble must perform 3 from this list, or 2 from this. Sorry, it's 2 from this list. So, which I thought was a thing only for high school, but some middle school festivals are that way. So for my festivals, not just my festivals, but for my concerts, I pretty much pick what I like to pick. And a lot of it is very, very all over the place. I do not stick with one type of music. A lot of my kids have told me that my music seems very dark and I should get help. But I love music in minor. I can't help it. But the point is, I don't stick with one composer. I don't stick with one type of music because my kids can't learn that way. And the hardest part, though, is being a middle school ensemble director, whether it's band or orchestra, because you're very limited. You're limited by your students' abilities, and that's not a bad thing. I'm not putting that as a bad thing. That's a fact. You are limited from what they can do, from your lowest student to your highest student. That's your ensemble. So you are in charge of picking music to teach the student who's here, but also keep the student who's up the top engaged. So it's hard to find music in that middle ground that won't be a struggle or too boring. But those pieces are usually the fun pieces, and usually those aren't the hardest. Those aren't the meatiest, the ones that you want them to learn from. So then you end up picking pieces from this certain composer who's known to write very well and who is on this qualified list of music to be on, and then you find yourself getting stuck here. And I challenge all of you, if you are this person who has to pick music from this list, I challenge you to go to the people who created that list, to rewrite that list, to add more pieces of diversity into that list, because there is so much more new music that is coming out onto the scenes that, yeah, this piece from the 1950s is dope. Like, yeah, okay, Elia Del Borgo, yes. But what about this piece over here from 2001, 2010, 2001 was like 20 years ago, y'all. Ooh, okay, 2015, sorry. I forgot 2001 was a long time ago. But still, we need music from that part of the decade onto this list, because I'm so tired of opening the list. Yeah, I love first suite in F, or first suite in E flat. Yeah, I love second suite in F, but can we get more? Can we do more? I'm not saying take those off the list. I'm saying add to the list. New music, new composers, diverse music. I tend to pick music that looks like one of my students in my ensemble. There is not one concert that went by last year that we were allowed to have that my students could not see something in my music in them. I mean, I'm all over the place when it comes to music, because when I was in middle school, that was the stuff I wanted to play. So I think how I was in middle school, and I go, you know what, I think this piece would be super cool, because it's a Puerto Rican carol, and I know I have a couple of Puerto Rican students in my ensemble. Now, I'm not saying go up to them and say, look at this piece I picked for you. I'm saying do your research, find music that looks like your students, looks like the person in the seat, and do that. And if you have to pick music from a list, maybe not go to that festival if you are literally limited to what you can do. I maybe just don't go to that festival. If you can't find something that actually relates to your students, then why are you doing it? It's not for me. I'm not getting these awards for me. I know how to play my instrument, so I know how to play the music that I'm giving them. Give them music that they want to play, or that sounds cool. That too. Sometimes it doesn't have to be about diversity. Sometimes it just has to sound cool. We sometimes we overthink things, and yeah, think about what sounds cool to a kid, or better yet, pick 5 things and have them pick 5, or pick from those 5. There you go. That way you're not all over the place. You got 5 songs that you know is awesome. Say, here you go. You get to pick a march, or you get to pick the lyrical, the ballad, which every middle school player hates playing. But let them pick the ballad, because then if they hate it, it's their fault. It's not your fault. Or maybe one day you pick music from 5 different composers who are of different nationalities. They don't have to be all Black. They don't have to be all Latina or Latinx. They don't have to be of all the same race. Just pick 5 and then let them pick.
Calesia, I think you touched on something so interesting to me that just like boom hit me, because I love also programming pieces not only that are recent, but like are really recent, like music from this decade, the music that the ink is still fresh in the paper, music that the composer has to go back and revise, and like oh, this wasn't the best idea, I'm gonna change that for the next. I love doing that because I feel that there is a reason why that music exists today, and exists today because those sensibilities were needed today. And these composers are on Facebook, they use Snapchat, they use Pinterest, just like we do. And so it's in a way one of us, a person that is alive in this time, a person who just lived through this incredible pandemic that we just lived through. So I think that makes it so relevant for the student experience. Wesley, what's your take on programming and on picking songs and all of that?
I think Kimberly and Calesia really just hit it on the head. Like, they hit it perfectly. Again, just allowing our students to choose the type of music, seeing what music relates to them, ask them why they enjoy the music, have them analyze the music to teach them those critical thinking skills. And then if they want to perform it, have them perform it. And then again, just choosing composers that are in recent times within the past decade that are still living. You know, we have people like Matt Jones, who's just killing right now in Chicago. So it's like get some arrangements like that, or see if there's ways to simplify some of those arrangements for their level of learning and playing and skill level. So no, and I also just want to commend and give shout outs to Kimberly and Calesia. It's so amazing to see women of color in the Rock Island School District. You know what I mean? That's something I wish I would have had coming up. So kudos to you both. Thank you. Our youth need you. And just thank you for doing what you all do. I appreciate you.
Beautiful. So we have a few questions here in the chat, and I would like to get through most of them before our time is over. So let's dive into those. Anita Allen had a very good question, and she says, through the Quad City Arts program, have you experienced musical artists of color? Either you, Wes, as a student who grew up in the Quad Cities, or Calesia and Kimberly, I guess your students' experiences in either school assemblies or other events in the Quad Cities. And one of the examples that she mentions is our symphony day with the youth orchestra, and nobody will get offended if the answer is no. So.
Okay, so with the Quad City Arts program, what's great is for anybody who doesn't know, they bring artists from all over the country and world to perform in the schools and sometimes do master classes in different places. I purposely always choose something I cannot see in the Quad Cities or in a surrounding area. So the last couple of performances I had a group, and I can't remember the names of the groups, but I'll explain. The very last group we had was one that performed authentic Mexican music, and they talked about the music from the different regions and explained the different instruments and had the dancing and had authentic clothing and taught kids the language and did all of these different things within the performance. So it's more of an informance in the general music setting. Before that, we had a beatbox Indian violinist combo, which was amazing because students got to talk to me and like, why does it sound different? I said, well, they don't use the same kind of scales we use. And able to just kind of show them more about that type of music. And so anytime that they come, one, they have a great variety, which I think is wonderful, but I always choose something that I haven't seen on the bill at the River Center or the Adler, or something that I can't go to something really close to see. That's what I put in front of my students, because I want them to see that what's around here in the Quad Cities isn't the only thing that you're going to see performance wise. What you see on TV in stereotypical media isn't the only thing out there. And so I try to make sure I pick things that are completely different. when it comes to the youth symphony, this is an access thing, and it's not, I don't think it's purposeful, but if you aren't someone who can take private lessons, not only because your family can afford it, but they can get you there, you have your own instrument, you have the time to do that, you don't have to worry about all the other things, it's hard to get into the Quad City Youth Symphony. I've had some students that I've taught that went through Central that I was like, whoa, I'm so excited because I see them. I think Sierra Craig was one of them. I'm like, yay, Black girl magic, you know, trombone player playing. So, I mean, you see some, and I tell students, I'm like, do you see that? And I make sure that I point out other students of color when we're at those performances, but it's not as diverse. And I don't personally believe it's because they're not choosing diverse. It's that we don't have as many students of color that have access to those things, so that when it comes up to auditions, if they're listening and they're doing a blind audition, it doesn't matter the color. It's, I haven't been able to have the lessons that you've been able to have, so you're gonna be better than me. You've been playing your instrument since you were 7, and I just started in 4th grade orchestra, you know, 3 years ago. So there's no, or, you know, however many, and I'm not gonna be at that same level. And that's something we have to fix before they get the opportunity to audition for the youth symphony. So it is something that there's a disconnect there in some way that we have to fix, whether it's in the public schools in connection with the QCSO, however, that disconnect has to be fixed.
And talk about being a multiplier agent, because now Sierra, who was your student, is a graduating senior this year, who is going to pursue studies in music education. So she's gonna become a music teacher. So that's amazing. Calesia?
I don't really have much to say about that. Kimberly pretty much said said it all, honestly. But as far as my students of color, I haven't really seen many go for the youth symphony, more so because they are band heads per se. So orchestra is not really on their radar. And when you say I'm going to be playing with strings, they're like, what? So a lot of my kids who are of color usually don't go that route. We, you know, our thing is jazz, but not, I shouldn't say our thing, but it kind of, we tend to gravitate towards that type of music. And I would love to see more kids steer to all of it, honestly, whether it's concert band, symphonic band, symphony orchestra, no matter what. But I just don't have many kids of color in my string program to begin with. So there's that dilemma. So yeah, so I don't have much to say, but I have had the Quad City Arts program have your musical artists come into our buildings on several occasions, and at my other schools outside of Moline. When I was at Eagle Ridge, we did have a couple of the artists come out. So I do remember those. Yeah.
I think one of the issues that we have to do is, at least when it comes to orchestra, is changing the perception that it is an elitist music. A lot of times it comes off as very elitist, and you know, it becomes a class issue where people feel as if, oh, in order to go to this concert, I have to have X amount of money, I have to dress a certain way, I can't afford a suit, I can't do it. So again, we talk about access, so finding ways to make it more accessible. Have a string quartet come to, again, like a church or a coffee shop, or wherever the case may be. Again, that can be decided according to the neighborhood or according to the city or where the need is. But again, just bringing that to them and not presenting it from such an elitist standpoint.
I have a really fascinating question, and I cannot wait to hear your answers on this one, actually. It's from, let me see if I can find it again. From Julie. She says, I would like to have a discussion about repertoire as a means of teaching diversity. I don't have a lot of diversity in my building, but I feel I can use music as a vehicle to help my students experience, get experiences that are outside of the rural community. What a great question. So let's go around to talk about this.
So to go from that, so I know Julie Wentz. She's an orchestra teacher, wonderful orchestra teacher in Davenport schools. But the first thing that I think of, even with my students, I want to introduce them to something they know and then connect something within that piece to something they don't know. So if I am teaching them, if we're trying to learn about solfege and we're learning about mi, re, do, I might start with something really simple like Three Blind Mice. And they're like, yeah, we've heard Three Blind Mice, whatever. And then connect it into a different piece that's outside of their cultural norm. And then say, well, do you hear that? We have that same thing. And then connect it to something else. Maybe that, oh, well, now do you hear what's happening with the instruments there? Isn't that just like this? And I just keep connecting it. And that's, I always start with where they're at. So start with where they're at, because if in your rural community, let's say all they listen to is Brahms for whatever reason, let's just say that, I don't know. Find something in Brahms that you know that the kids are just like, I really like this. I really like Symphony No. 4. It is just my jam, okay? Find out what in Symphony No. 4 is their thing, and then say, ooh, did you know that this artist did it this way, but they twisted it on its side like this? And then they start listening for that and they're like, oh my goodness, I can't even believe that. Oh, but not only that, this here, like there was an Ariana Grande song that has My Favorite Thing, the melody for My Favorite Things in it. These are a few of my favorite things, right? And I said, guys, do you know that this Ariana Grande song is actually a song from a musical called Sound of Music? And they're looking at me like, no, get out of here. And I was like, oh, you don't know? You don't believe me? And I pull it up on YouTube and I show them and they're like, really? And then guess what? They asked me, can we watch Sound of Music? I just took them to a whole nother thing that they weren't aware of because I connected it to something they already knew. So that's my advice for doing that. Start with where they are and then find a connection in something different.
As for ensemble music, it's not too far off either from what Kimberly's saying, because you can still find ensemble music that has those little pieces of things that they already know from other songs, from other movies. Oh, if you want to talk about connection and diversity, find some ensemble music that is based from movies or soundtracks, because I guarantee I guarantee you are able to make a connection with that music to any other piece that just might be a piece from a Latin composer or a Black composer, and it has nothing to do with the movie. It could have absolutely nothing to do with the movie, but it might have a certain rhythm that's connected from that movie, and you just and you just make it work like this. And then all of a sudden, now you're talking about this composer and you're talking about this composer's life, or you're talking about why this music is relevant only because you made a small connection. And I just did that today in my private lesson. I had a student, it wasn't diversity related, but it was literally the smallest connection that I could make to make a light bulb click and make that student interested in what I was saying, or make that student go, oh, I've been doing this the whole time, or oh, this is actually more interesting now. I kind of want to do more of this. So it's not about just picking a random diverse piece. And I know you want to connect it and teach it to your kids, but you have to make them interested first. Classes like what we have, kids opt to take our class. So we don't want to scare them away by forcing math problems down their throat, or forcing types of music that has no relevance to their life. But I'm so excited that you want to add more diversity to your program. And I highly suggest just listening to a lot of pieces. And when you listen to them, check out the composer, and then start doing a little bit of research of how you can connect anything that they've done to what you're already doing. So that way you don't have to do more work, because I'm all about less work.
I think you guys really covered a lot of it as far as just assuring that everyone gets a diversity of music listening, of being able to learn, of being able to make those cultural connections, of being able to understand that music is truly language. And even being able to learn that music itself has dialects. Being able to really just get into really in depth about those things. And again, just finding ways for those who may not play instruments, find ways for them to get included, whether there's programs that get them into digital music, because that's a huge thing. So being able to offer that to the youth as well. And again, just finding all the different type of ways to connect and get them engaged and get them involved. So no, you guys hit everything on the head. I can't really say much. You guys are awesome.
The next question we have here is also very good. It says, what can parents do to encourage a musical environment in the home? Listen to this, a musical environment in the home. So this is less about screens and about apps and whatnot. A musical environment in the home, regardless of socially economic aspects, as well as in their communities, and not only at home as it pertains to their musical education.
I think, so every culture has music. Every culture. That's the one thing that cultures have. I was just trying to do a dance unit, hopefully when it gets warm enough that I can take kids outside and actually have music, you know, in person, maybe outside, socially distanced. And I was learning about hula, Hawaiian hula, and Hawaiian hula exist to tell a story and to keep the history of the people going, because they didn't have a written language, but they had the music and the dance to keep going. So I think inherently homes have music. It's just that they may not be coming to school with what we think they need to be musicians. So you have some students, you have some kindergartners come in, and bless their hearts, they cannot keep a beat. They cannot, the steady beat, it just isn't there. And you have some, you ask them to keep the steady beat and they can pop lock the steady beat and they can do all the things. But it's just because maybe one household is dancing more and another household is doing more not active listening, but passive listening. So it just depends on the value of music in their home. And I don't think we can go into people's homes and tell them how to value music within their family structure. What I do like to do is when parents do come to the school setting, I like to make sure they know, like, this is what your students did. And if you want to try something like this at home, or they get music in our schools night, we started doing that at our school. And I give them like a little info sheet with some different activities that they can do. And they've been doing a lot of music at home with the pandemic, so hopefully that's been helping. But as far as the socioeconomic aspect, that is an issue I have to deal with in general music, because they all come to me regardless of where they live or what they do. So I don't know, Calesia, if you want to speak to that specifically.
Yeah, I do find a challenge with that. I missed the person who asked the question, so sorry if I don't mention your name, but I find a challenge with getting parents to be involved in the performance side of ensembles. And it's not, I shouldn't say it's a problem. I just find a struggle to keep parents engaged. And I came from a mom who was not engaged in my playing at all. Like, the only thing that she said was, you're going to do band. And fun fact, Wesley, I didn't want to mention it, but I'm so glad you did. That my mom didn't want me to do orchestra. I found this out later because she thought that I wasn't of class to do it. So there you go. I just didn't mention that. She assumed that she always thought band was more fitting for our class and that we could do that. And orchestra was not seen for something that we could achieve. So anyway, so growing up, my mom didn't come to my concerts. My mom didn't watch me practice. My mom didn't tell me to practice. It was never, Calesia, you need to get your horn out and you need to practice. She did that for piano lessons, because I did take piano lessons, but never my trombone. It was more so, okay, your teacher at school to do that, because I don't know how to do that. Well, guess what, Mom, Dad? You do. All you have to do is say, get your horn out. That's like all I ever ask is just to tell your kids to get it out, even if they don't get it out. Because that little involvement right there makes a huge difference. Oh wait, you're invested in this $1,000 instrument you're actually renting or paying for. Oh, that's so crazy. And I don't mean to say it in that tone, but that's what kids think. Like if my mom would have said that to me, I probably would have practiced more. I really would have. But I didn't practice. Don't tell my student. If I got any parents in here, don't tell my kids. But I didn't practice. Okay, in middle school, I didn't do it. Because my mom didn't tell me to. And I need an adult to tell me to do those things. And so what I do, well, before this year of no concerts, before I sent out monthly newsletters and I took pictures of kids in the classroom if they were able to be photographed. And I sent things like that home, showing them their kids performing or just practicing or rehearsing. And then every newsletter, I said, encourage your child to practice. I only asked for like 20 minutes a week. My band director used to ask for an hour a day when I was in middle school. So it's honestly just asking them to do one small change, and they don't have to sit in the room and watch them. And the kid probably won't even get the instrument out. But if the parent asks and is more involved in the investment of the instrument that they're buying or that they're renting, that changes a kid's perspective, whether they see it or not. And so I'm fully aware that that may never happen. And so I don't go into my rehearsals and scold the kid for not practicing. Guess what? We're about to practice right now. We're about to practice together. That's what I do. And I'm not mad at it. I kind of like it because now I get to tell them how to practice and show them how to practice. And now we're practicing together. So whether they go home or not and practice, it's fine. But parent support is one of the biggest things that we will always fight, because like Kimberly said, we can't go into someone's home and tell them how to parent their child or how to bring music into their home, because they probably weren't in band or orchestra or choir. So they don't know that you're supposed to do these things. My mom didn't know. So that's why she didn't do it. She just thought I was supposed to do it, or she actually expected my teacher to do it, which is fine too, because, you know, I'm on the other shoe of that. So I get it. So that's pretty much all you can do. Whoever asks that question, you just keep asking and till you get blue in the face. You just keep asking. Like, that's all you have to, that's all you can do.
That's great. I have a great one here, and maybe I'll direct this one to Wesley first. What are some ideas that an orchestra director can implement to change the perception that an orchestra is elitist, especially when working with beginners and the families of young students?
Oh, that's a great question. Again, like I kind of said earlier, just being mindful of where these concerts are being hosted. And I think now that's going to change a lot more since the pandemic. I think people are going to be a lot more open to having concerts in untraditional areas, just because we've been forced to, and to think differently. And be thoughtful of things like dress codes. Dress codes kind of give that perception and perspective that certain people are not welcome. So be mindful of those things as well. Repertoire, like we've talked about, again, choosing this style of music, maybe having them even just for listening, have them listen to different styles of music, or different orchestras that are doing just not so traditional classical styles of music. Abstract orchestra is a really good one. They did Suite for Ma Dukes, something for Jay Dilla. I'm not sure if the kids would be so into Jay Dilla, but just, you know, if that was around, if I was coming up, I would have definitely been interested, a lot more interested. So just finding ways to connect with them. Like, I think there's even a Chief Keef with strings. You know what I mean? Just whatever ways you can connect with them, find that way to connect with them and make it happen. And that's what really sparked that passion.
Fabulous. Well, thank you so much, everyone. I have a comment here from, I believe it was Jerry, who says, like, Venezuela has had this El Sistema since 1975 and produced thousands of musicians, not just Gustavo Dudamel. Cheers to that. Many of those children have been saved or relieved from homes of poverty. What can we do to start a similar system in the QC? Boy, let's do it. I want to do this. I want to do this now. I mean, that would be a fantastic thing, because one of the great things about El Sistema is it's not just the kids that you see in the orchestra playing. Like, behind every kid, there's a family that has been transformed. Behind every kid that you see performing, playing their violin on stage, there's a mom that ironed that shirt, an older brother, a father who has like been inspired with their work ethic and their discipline that they learned through the system. So it's an exponential transformation that happens community-wide. So I am so inspired to do something similar to El Sistema from Venezuela here in the Quad Cities. Thank you, everybody, for participating in this incredibly interesting and stimulating conversation. We appreciate all three of you, Kimberly, Calesia, and Wesley, and thank you to the Quad Cities Symphony and the AALS for hosting this incredible conversation. With that, have a good night.